They say those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it. Let's look back at 3 games from last season and the lessons the Predators must remember ahead of 2024-2025.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this Monday episode with a shout out to our Locked On Pred heads. Those are our everydayers who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. We appreciate your support, and we love that we get to spend a little bit of your day with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer with Penalty Box Radio, and my friends, I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I'm the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
On today's show, we're going to take a look back at 3 big games from last season. And friends, not all of those are going to be pleasant to reflect on, but we're going to remind ourselves of some difficult but important lessons that the Predators learned last season in those games and talk about how the Predators must carry over those lessons when the puck drops in October. Emma, when we are talking about these games, I find it ironic that 2 of the 3 games we're going to talk about actually are the Dallas Stars games. And it's literally like the older brother who kicks the little brother's butt. And somehow the little brother grows up to be tough. They're just so rough.
Yeah. It's like the one nemesis that keeps coming back in different ways too, because they were 2 very different losses, but same team, same feeling afterwards. Pretty bad.
Yes. Yeah. So let's start with one of those, because doesn't that sound like fun? And let's go back to December 23rd, 2023. The Nashville Predators played the Dallas Stars. Of course, always a big game, that last home game before Christmas with Nashville. And the Predators lost this one 3-2, but it wasn't just a 3-2 loss. It is the way in which the Nashville Predators lost this game. Of course, Dallas entered this game on a 5-game point streak. Nashville had gone 4-1 in their last 5 games. This was also the game, if you remember from highlights from last season, this is the game where Roman Josi found himself in the crease. Juuse Saros was down. Roman Josi kind of gloved and threw away the puck for a save. So this is the game we're talking about. Unfortunately, these are not the kind of moments we're going to talk about. The Predators had a 2-goal lead that included a power play goal from Colton Sissons, and then Dallas in the third period scored midway through the third. We're talking 2-1 game. Okay. Dallas went empty net with a 2-1 score, and with 13 seconds later, former Predator Craig Smith scored. Now, the puck did bounce off Gustav Nyquist, but it doesn't matter. A goal is a goal is a goal. And it looked like, okay, we're headed into overtime. Great. So all of us in Media Row, kind of unpack our bags and we're ready for overtime. But with 2 seconds left, the Dallas Stars scored because the Predators were sort of just waiting for overtime, watching the puck, and they lost that game 3-2. Emma, when you think back to that game, what stands out to you about it, besides how painful it was?
Well, I think the Predators were doing what you were doing on Media Row, just be like, all right, let's just get this to overtime. And I think, it's a reminder that that's not guaranteed. Like you got to play. I mean, it's a cliche for a reason. You got to play all 60 minutes. And they didn't. They took 1 second off, and we saw what happened. And I think, because I remember I was actually not physically present at that game. It was one of, I think, the 2 games I missed last year, but it was, I remember I was watching it on TV at my parents' house, and I was like, what? I was just screaming. I remember I'm screaming at the TV, and I think I had seen I was watching, or I was keeping track of the score on my phone, but also
Mhm.
watching it on TV, but the TV was on a delay. And
Yes.
so I saw the score update on the phone and I thought it was a glitch or something. I was like, no, 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 no. It's going to overtime. It's not over. It's going to overtime. And I was like, oh, nope. Yep. It's over. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I think it's, we talk a lot about teams that, about playing with a lead. That was a big issue for Nashville in the early part of last season. And this was perfect example of that. But like just playing like you want to win games. And I think that not being able to close, either to hold on to a lead or to close out a game or even bring it to overtime in that situation like that, it's those winnable games that they
Mm.
were kind of letting slip away, and it became a pattern. This was one game, but it was an example of a lot of losses that they had. Not quite as dramatic with the 13-second thing, but it's still it was a pattern, and I think that was where I think the biggest thing that stood out to me was the mental lapse in
Yes.
and it's like they clearly had played well enough to win the game, but or at least to get it to overtime. But it was like you saw those mental lapses and they came. If one of those comes at the wrong time, then you're going to pay for it. And that's what happened.
Yep. I remember watching them get that go ahead goal and thinking, I have to pack my bag up real quick, because just behind the scenes look, when you're covering the games, you have so little time between that final buzzer to get on the elevator, to get downstairs, to get to media. And so it's kind of a mad dash. And I remember I'm chucking my way down the hallway and a guy walks out of the arena area and he looks at his friend, just shocked, and he goes, dude, we just lost. It was like, that is the best summary of what the heck just happened. Dude, we just lost. And it was that shocking.
I
That
do
game.
remember thinking that. I think like the first thought I had was like, wow, I'm very glad that I'm not there so I don't have to go into that locker room afterwards, because that does not sound fun.
It does not. Well, speaking of locker room, I went back and clipped part of the post game. This is Michael McCarron talking after that 3-2 late game loss. This is what he had to say after the game.
Yeah, like I said, they were pushing. I mean, I think. I mean, I don't want to necessarily say we were on our heels trying to just get pucks out and pucks in, but kind of felt like that a little bit. I don't think that was our intention at all going into the third period. We wanted to stay foot on the gas, and like I said, the next evolution for our team is to find ways to put pressure on them in the third with the lead, be comfortable with still playing our same kind of game and pushing for that next goal. I mean, hey, like it's fun scoring goals in this league, and if we can stay above our guys and still find ways to produce offense in the third with a lead, that's what makes really good teams really good.
I love that quote from him. He talks about the next evolution for that team. And then he says, playing with the lead and continuing to push for that next goal, that's what makes really good teams really good. And I think that is such a valuable lesson, because as we look ahead to next season and you look at this roster and you look at Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault and you look at what the Predators have added and you look at what could be offensively, you have to remember that potential does not show up on the scoreboard. And, Michael McCarron said, what makes a really good team really good is you take advantage of every moment. You push the whole game. And that was a tough lesson for Nashville to learn, but it's going to be important going ahead, because I think there is a little, from the fan base, there is a confidence that like, oh, we are going to be really competitive. Well, you're going to be really competitive if you compete for 60 minutes.
Exactly.
That's it. It's not what's on your roster. It's what you do on the ice. You were saying the other day, Barry Trotz says we don't play hockey on paper. We play hockey, on the ice. So I think, man, you've got to remember this lesson looking ahead to next season for this Predators team. Oof.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Coming up, we are going to talk about another super fun Dallas game. You all know the one we're talking about. And yes, we're gonna break down that 9-2 excellent loss and tell you what the Predators need to learn from it next season. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Indeed. We're all driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree. Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and let them know you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Again, that's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, Emma. It's just like the game that will never, ever, ever go away, and for painfully good reason. Now we have the blessing of hindsight, and we know what happens after this game. But just going back to February 15th, 2024, where the Nashville Predators lost 9-2, my friends. 9-2. And just in case you forgot how horrible it was, let's just walk through the game real quick. Dallas was up 4-0 after the first period. And if that stat doesn't make you feel a little nauseous, the stat of shots on goal will. Nashville was outshot 18-1.
I had
18-1.
even forgotten that detail. Man.
And I remember when Nashville finally got a shot on goal, the whole Bridgestone Arena cheered because it was so late in the first period. And it was like, it's never going to happen. Kevin Lankinen came in for UC Saros in the second period. Nashville did outshoot Dallas 21-15 in the second period, but it was a 6-2 game after 40 minutes. In the third period, Dallas added 2 goals, while the Predators sat around and literally looked like they wanted to be anywhere else for the final 20 minutes. For me, Emma, I would say this is probably the worst performance I've ever seen from the team. It was only the 6th time in Predators history that they've only recorded 1 shot on goal in a period. And it had been since 2017 that Dallas had scored more goals in a period. So this was a huge game for Dallas, in statistics and franchise history. A huge game for Nashville in team and franchise history, but not in the better way. When you look back to that game, what do you remember about that game? And what do you think Nashville learned on that very, very hideous February 15th day?
Oh, that was hideous.
It was horrible.
I mean, it was hard because we all remembered the first one that you mentioned, the first Dallas game that, they were so close and then they just let it slip away at the end. We all remembered that. So we're thinking like, oh, this team, they're going to come back and they're going to, they're going to stick it to Dallas, and oh my, did that not happen. So I think, yeah, it was just one of those. I remember thinking, I feel like at least, in the 2 seasons that I covered the Predators, the first game I experienced like that was in the 22-23 season at Madison Square Garden. Final score, I think, was 7-1 Rangers.
Ooh.
Like it was not good.
Yeah.
That at least with this one, I didn't have to hear the Rangers goal song 80 times. But still, it was hard. And I just remember thinking like, wow, like this is not good. And it was like you said, it was like they just looked defeated. And defeated, I mean, yes, they were literally defeated, but I think like even before the game was over, it was like they had already stopped playing. And I was like, that doesn't, I do remember thinking like Bruno is not going to be happy with this, not because of the score, not because of the final score, because that, you know, speaks for itself, but it was just the effort wasn't there. And it just looked very uncharacteristic of that team. And I think it's one of those where, and I mean, we now see what happened after that, where
Right.
it's like it's one of those moments where it can go one of two ways real quick. Either that's the start of your free fall, or that is your rock bottom and that propels you back up. And that, I think, I mean, clearly it was the latter for the Predators, and we saw the results of that. But I think it was, you know, you learned a lot about that team from how they responded after
Yes.
that, I think. But it was not a pretty journey getting there.
No. It's interesting after games like this, sometimes one of the questions that comes up with the players is, you know, is this one of those games that you just sort of flush it? And there are games where I think you lose, you make a mistake that you know you need to correct, and you can say, hey, you know what, we're not going to dwell on this loss super long. We know what we needed to fix. We can just flush it. This was so not a flush it game.
No.
And like you said, it was so pivotal. What this team did after this game is more important than what happened in those 60 minutes. It was far less painful, of course. They went on that point streak, but what the team did by hitting rock bottom, I think, is really important. Do you learn your lesson? Do you dig in, or do you give up? And, you know, they showed that there was a next level, and they showed this is not what we're going to be. This is not how we're going to end the season. I also look back at that game and I think, you know, we talk about how good UC Saros is. And, you know, then we hear people say, well, this was his worst year statistically. But this is one of those games I point to and I say, it does not matter how good your goaltender is if your defense in front of him is invisible. And I mean, bless, you know, there was the first goal I think UC Saros would have liked back. But
Yes.
Kevin Lankinen and UC Saros really had very little support in front of them. And you've got to have great defense no matter how good your goaltender is. Like, man, you know, and looking ahead at the Predators roster, of course, they've made some changes on defense, and that's going to be something they're going to have to do. Yes, UC Saros is going to have to, you know, come back and show everybody he's earned this 7.74 million AAV and all of that. But you also have to have a really good defense playing in front of you for 60 minutes, my friends. For
Yep.
60 minutes, you know. After this game, I will tell you, and I don't know how you felt, Emma, but we got through the locker room. So unpleasant. I would hate for you to think that was a fun media. And then we went and sat in the media room and we waited for Andrew Brunette. And I remember thinking, this is going to be so bad. This is going to be so bad. You know, and I don't like conflict. I don't like, you know, I don't like that. And I was just like, oh man. And it's funny because I remember in my mind him being angry, but when I went back and watched the post game, he was more resigned in
Yeah.
just this weird, it was like when your parents are so disappointed in you, they don't yell at you.
It's worse. It's like, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. Like that
Oh,
somehow feels worse.
yes. Yes. And that was the Andrew Brunette we got. This is a clip of what he had to say after that 9-2 Dallas loss.
Yeah, I think just disappointing the mindset since the break, really. I mean, I think the Arizona game, we didn't play very good for 2 periods, and we're able to sneak something out of that, and we weren't ready to play. And it was evident tonight we got what we deserved. Well, it's disappointing. You know, I think it can only be addressed so many times. Either we're not taking it serious enough or we're not understanding. So the response and the mindset is really disappointing. I think not understanding where we're at or having trouble getting their mind around what's important. That's hockey. It's not everything else that goes around hockey. It's the game of hockey. And I don't know if we're understanding the importance of that our mind has to be in the game. It can't be in our vacations.
So that was the comment that had everybody in the meeting going, I'm sorry, what? On our vacations. And of course, we all know the U2 story that has since come out. But it's interesting because so much of Andrew Burnett's comments after that game, it was not about execution. It was about the mindset of this team. And I think that is something to remember looking forward. Yes, on paper, this team has a tremendous amount of talent and they have a tremendous amount of potential on ice. But so much of success comes down to mindset. And can this team get on the same page with so many big new pieces and move in the right direction earlier? And I think that's something we really are going to have to watch next season.
Yeah, definitely. Same, I mean, manifested differently, but similar idea with the first Dallas loss. It's like it's mental. It's mental lapses, and you got to all be on the same page or things can unravel real quickly.
Yeah. Now, I have always said this, feelings are like farts. After that game, it felt like the Nashville Predators season was over. Coming up, we're going to talk about a game that proved that Nashville had another level in them. We're going to talk about that overtime Vegas win. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, Emma, it is time to step away from talking about the losses. Although I will say this, in hockey as in life, sometimes you learn your best lessons from your biggest failures. And Nashville certainly has some things that they want to carry forward from those losses. But let's talk about a really great game that Nashville played March 26th, 2024 against the reigning Stanley Cup champion at the time, the Vegas Golden Knights. Of course, the Predators had been on a run since that 9-2 Dallas loss that we just talked about. They were 15-0-2, 17-game point streak, playing the reigning Stanley Cup champions, and they were down 3-0 at the end of the first period. And there were some mistakes that Nashville made. They had some defensive zone turnovers. Vegas was able to score in transition. The second period comes, Mark Jankowski scores for the Predators. I do want to give a shout out to Luke Evangelista, who went after the puck in the boards and made a great assist on that. So it was a 3-1 game. But then William Karlsson scores with less than a minute to go in the second period to make it 4-1 after 40 minutes. And at this point, you can almost say to yourself, look, if this streak is going to end, we can feel okay if it ends against the Stanley Cup champions. But Nashville kept plugging away in the third period. Ryan O'Reilly scored. Philip Forsberg chased after a loose puck net front. And then Gus Nyquist scored a power play goal. They tied that up. They played really good defense to keep the game tied up. And then Roman Josi in overtime cut to the net, and it was chef's kiss. It was just an amazing game. Probably the loudest I had heard Bridgestone Arena up to that point. And it was one of those ones where the crowd was on their feet. Like that, just nobody was sitting by the time the Predators got back into this. And so when I look back at this win, I really think the thing that stands out to me is that Nashville really could have surrendered this game and walked away not too embarrassed. They could have had a player or two kind of go rogue under the pressure of keeping the streak alive. But what they did was stick to the game plan. Like they didn't try to do too much. They just kept doing what had brought them success. And I think that is such an important thing, to trust the process, trust the things that have brought you success.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was one where, especially when they went down 3-0 early, I think we were all kind of like, all right, well, this game's over.
Yeah.
And then, Jankowski had the goal, and it's like, oh, a little bit of life, but so quickly Vegas came back and scored again. It's like, all right, well, nope, never mind. And I think, it's one of the, again, not to be negative, but as we have previously established, I am a pessimist. I think one of the things with that win that I think was like kind of a common theme is like, yes, Jankowski got the scoring started, but who lifted this team out from the gutter? It was that top line and
Yes.
Roman Yossi,
Yes.
literally those four guys. And it was good, and we say this all the time, that it's like you need your best players to be your best players, especially in situations like that. But I think it was another kind of illustration of how top heavy this team was last year. And I think points to, one of the many reasons that Barry Trotz went out and acquired all of this depth, these pieces in the offseason, including Jonathan Marchessault, who even brought up that particular game in his intro media availability.
Yes,
And he was
he
like,
did.
yeah, we didn't like that. We didn't
Yep.
like that one. I remember that. And so I think that, it addresses, or Barry Trotz wanted obviously to address some depth concerns there, and I think that it was great. It was obviously the end result was really really good to see, but I think it did kind of point out like, yeah, it's the same four guys doing everything.
Right. And as much as it was great to watch, and as well as they did carrying this team, that cannot be what the team looks like going forward. And like you said, he went out and made these moves in the offseason that I think are going to add a tremendous amount to Nashville's depth. Now, can they put all of that together with these new players, and what is that process going to look like? And I think that's going to be one of the biggest storylines, as we're looking ahead. Where I don't know, maybe a month. I don't even know what the date is. Maybe a little bit less than a month out from training camp. And I think one of the biggest storylines going forward is, how are you going to integrate what Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault bring? Clearly, they bring tons of talent, but how do you integrate that with this team and get everybody moving in the same direction? Because when you look at that point streak, that's what was so successful for Nashville, is that everybody was pulling, they would always say, we're pulling the rope in the same direction. Everybody was doing their job. Everybody stuck to the plan. How do you bring in these top players, and how quickly can you get them all on the same page as well? And I think that's going to be a huge lesson and a huge challenge for the Predators. Yes, again, on paper, it looks great, but how does that kind of walk out for this team going forward? I think it's going to be a big storyline for the Preds.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, we're curious, what were your big games when you think back to last season, and what are the takeaways that you see from those games, wins or losses, that you think the Predators have got to learn and take with them in 2024-25? We would love to know your thoughts on that. You can, of course, tweet us at LO_Predators. You can leave us a comment under this YouTube video. And if you want to chat beyond the podcast, you can, of course, join our Locked On Predators Insider program via subtext. Details for that are in the description of this video. It's also in the notes of our bio. It's just a chance for you to talk Nashville Predators hockey with Emma and I anytime. Breaking news. We're going to be bringing a lot more information in game as well when the season kicks off. And of course, updates at training camp and all that stuff as well. So it may be the off season, but we are gearing up for next season, and we're going to have to wait and see what this new looking Nashville Predators team can do. It's going to be exciting. Before we sign off, Emma, let everyone know where they can find you and your work.
You can find me on social media at Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at @AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work at Penalty Box Radio as well. That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back later this week with an all new episode. We'll see you then.